CNN recently reported that a fundamentalist Christian family beat its adopted daughter to death in an effort to discipline her. As an attempt to justify this irreconcilable behavior, the family cited a book which vindicates its own cruel teachings based on biblical scripture. I'd like to address the serious problem with religion that occurred here, which is something far bigger than some verses in an obsolete holy book giving poor life instructions. I also have some things to say for those people who adopt the philosophy that sparing the rod spoils the child. Physical child abuse is not strictly inclusive to those who adhere to ancient biblical customs. There's no shortage of non-religious parents who consider hitting their children the best means of discipline, whether it's from traditional understanding, misinformation from other parents, the frustration of dealing with children, or any number of other reasons. It's also important to recognize that there are Christians who raise their children without striking them, whether it's because they haven't read their own Bible, as most haven't, they have and regard it as outdated literature that it is, so they don't obey that part that they know better on, or they view it through some complex apologetics to think it means something apart from what it actually does say, so that they can go on liking 100% of the Bible by interpreting away all the nasty bits. The real religious problem to be acknowledged is one I've mentioned before. Of course, there are religious people who are civilized and informed enough to dislike biblical orders to beat unruly children, regard homosexuals as abominations, or treat women like objects designed to make babies and serve husbands. They consider all those things to be unchristlike. Meanwhile, there exist many people alive today whose own opinions are actually in line with that primitive piece of literature. Those people are then under the impression that Scripture, which just happens to fall in line with most if not all of their own thinking by some divine coincidence, means they no longer have fallible human opinions. Their decisions are those of God, and they are surrounded by a culture with enough respect for religion to socially excuse otherwise insufferable behaviors and ideologies. So, shifting blame from a demented family's cruel actions to the religion itself is a mistake that plays into their hands. However, it would also be a mistake to ignore religion's overall negative influence because of its tendency to give a wide variety of people individual God complexes on issues that should be open for discussion to arrive at the most modernly informed decisions possible. For those of you parents who think it's in your child's best interest to physically discipline them, I implore you to do some basic research into child psychology to find some evidence that supports your position. Your children are completely vulnerable and incapable of defending themselves against their physical attacks. They are impatient, incompetent, unruly, whiny, unpredictable, and recalcitrant little rascals, especially at a young age. I completely understand and empathize for your frustration and even your temptation to resort to the violence your own parents may have used on you when your patience is nearly exhausted. The fact remains, however, that when you made the decision to bring that child or those children into this world and or into your home, you took on the responsibility of crafting those raw materials into decent human beings. Beating a child into submission by any capacity is not the appropriate means for fulfilling that responsibility. While I don't lightly blur the lines between a moderate spank and a savage onslaught of physical violence, they're different degrees of the same flawed course of action. The most powerful mechanism that parents have for teaching children is modeled behavior. It marvels me how many parents shout at their children and strike them to show they are wrong for doing that which they did not or could not understand was wrong to begin with, or even for deliberately breaking rules. Which of those parents don't teach the same children not to shout at or hit people? Is the unabashed hypocrisy so difficult to notice here? Is your understanding of your children so weak that you can't grasp that by shouting and striking your child, you are teaching them to shout and to strike? You're teaching them that those who can physically impose their will onto others have authority, and in an effort to gain that desired authority, they are to do the same. I'd like to close by challenging those of you who still consider physical punishment the best means for teaching your children right from wrong. Ask yourself if you feel comfortable sending your child or children to a school that permitted its teachers to physically strike them as a means of teaching them right from wrong. What would you think of a teacher who spends 8 hours per day with your child and couldn't get through it without implementing the techniques you find so suitable? Is a teacher who can do that with not only your child but 29 others at the same time more qualified to raise your child than you are? The hard, honest, factual information states that those professionals not only have the patience, but they have taken the time to learn actual strategies for discipline and education of children without ever causing them physical pain. They've taken up the same aforementioned responsibility that you have to mold them into stable, productive young adults. It's not an easy charge or a light responsibility, but it's one that you have taken as a parent. And if you aren't capable of handling it, I suggest you find someone who is.